In this video, I'm going to be talking about different examples of activity list description. So this is really where we kind of get into the nuts and bolts and look at some really solid examples of how do I actually do this? What does that look like? So we're going to go over a lot of examples, and it should be pretty clear for you once we get through it. So here's just an example of what this activity section looks like. So if you go into your CommonApp, you see on the left toolbar, you have your profile, your family information, your education information, testing, and then those activities. And it goes by activity number. So it'll say activity 1, activity 2, activity 3. And you will input using these this format they use. So just as this example, right? It has your activity type, the position and the description of that organization, any details, honors, accomplishments, what grades you participated in it, the timing of participation. So it'll say like school year or there's a couple different options. How many hours you spent per week, how many weeks you spent per year, and then if you wanted to attend something similar in college. So, and then with these positions and the details here, that's where you only get that 150 characters here. It's not a lot of space. So that's why I was saying it's a lot easier to write it down first, because when you have to go through 10 activities and do this, it can get just kind of overwhelming for a lot of students. So it's nice to just kind of know what you're getting into beforehand. You will see when I go through these examples, the main thing I'm focusing on for examples is the position here and how to utilize that to actually make it pop. And you're trying to get a lot of information in like really small space. So there's some ways to do that, some strategies. And then this is the description down here. So I'll show you some examples of that. So you have your activity type, and then and the position, and then the description. So I'll show you kind of what those look like here. So here are some tips. Again, you only get 150 characters, so we have to be smart about how we're going to use this space. So the first example, in that top box where you put your role and the organization name, you're going to put your role and the organization in that top box, and you want to do that because you don't want to waste characters in the lower box. Okay, so you're not going to repeat that. So, for example, instead of saying school newspaper, I'm the editor of the school newspaper, that's boring. You want to say editor of sports, comma, school newspaper. And then in that description box, you can say responsible for brainstorming, revising, and supervising articles by other writers for my column. Right? Something like that. Right? So now I have more detail. I understand more about what your position was, and I could do it within that small space. You also want to emphasize tangible, measurable impact. Okay, so who did your activity help, or how many people did you help, or how much money did you raise? Be as specific as you can. So instead of saying, I raised money for children in Cambodia, say something like, raised $5,000 for the ABC orphanage to buy food, clothing, school supplies, and medical care for almost a year of operations, right? Or you could say for 100 children or whatever it is, but you want to be really tangible, because isn't that great? Versus like, hey, I raised money, and then you're like, what'd you raise, like $20? Like, I don't know how much money you raised. So you want to be specific on that. Always use active verbs, right? Just like when you do your essays, you always want to use active verbs. Instead of worked at a clinic doing different things, you could say something like organized patient diagnosis notes, sterilized tools for surgeries, assisted with x-ray analysis, something like that. To fit in more info, again, you don't have a lot of characters. So this is a different type of writing, right? This isn't an essay. This is more like a resume. So you can write differently. You can use incomplete sentences. This is like one of the very few times in your writing career you're going to be able to use incomplete sentences. So you want to cut any extra words because you're just not going to have the space. Instead of saying, I raised money to donate to a school in Ghana in Africa by selling t-shirts and bracelets, you want to say, arranged advertising events, organized fundraisers, and gave presentations at school meetings. And then in that top box, I would probably say something like president of fundraising, ABC School in Ghana. Use the present tense if it's something you still do. And so instead of saying I helped past tense, right? I helped tour visitors around the campus and presented some information on school history and student life. But if you're still giving those tours, you would say I give campus tours, providing info on school history, student activities, and like boarding life, right? If it's like a boarding school or something. So something like that, but you want to use present tense if it's something you are still doing. You also want to aim for some variety in your list, and you want to make sure that you're not being redundant, right? That whole, you don't want to have double words in one sentence. So instead of saying instructing, helping, teaching children tennis, right? How is instructing, helping, and teach really any different, right? Those are all kind of synonyms. So you could say something like instructing in proper technique while imparting lessons in sportsmanship, health, and integrity. That sounds more powerful, right? Number 7, include any responsibilities you had to demonstrate leadership skills. This is big. A lot of universities, they love hearing leadership skills. So anytime you can put that in there, you want to put that in there. I do want to note on this that a lot of students, when they think of leadership skills, they think like the captain. Like I have to be the captain, or I have to be the president of this club, or a vice president of this club or something. And you will learn as you as we go through life that, leaders are people that are influential. They are not necessarily people with a title. You can have a title and not be the leader. So think outside the box on that. Just if you had to demonstrate leadership skills, you can put this on here. So instead of I swim on the swim team, and maybe you're not the captain of the swim team, but you could put, I'm, responsible for leading swim practices, planning fundraising events, assisting in recruiting process, right? So yeah, you might not be a captain or, have like a formal title, but like I led swim lessons. Like, isn't that leadership? I helped with our fundraising. Like that's leadership, right? So those kinds of things you can add in there, and those do demonstrate leadership skills. What if there isn't much to say or is a one-time event? This happens a lot with students, especially I see this a lot with like fundraising events or different cultural events. And like, for example, let's say you're part of some cultural community and they have a big event, like a fair or something like that every year, but it's like a one-time thing, or it's a once a year fundraiser or something. But one, I will tell you, as somebody who's done a lot of those kind of things, that's a lot of work. Like planning a fair or fundraiser, it's a lot of work. People definitely don't give it as much credit as they should. You could put a lot of hours into that. So you really want to focus on explaining the significance in the activity. Who did the event matter to? And really, that's where like putting in those hours matters. So rather than something like tutored students, like let's say you did this for like 2 weeks, you went to like an after school tutoring program. So it wasn't like a thing you did twice a week for a whole year, but you did it for like 2 weeks. You could say something like provided support to 4th graders with particularly difficult math concepts, right? That's significant, right? That's important that those kids are getting the support that they need. So that's important work. Don't diminish it just because I did it for 2 weeks versus a whole year. That's okay. It was significant, and you can put that on there. You want to avoid anything extreme like ending poverty, right? You want to say something like to aid in the fight against global poverty. And you want to use bigger words that are more really, I guess, like I would say more professional, right? So instead of come up with, right, I came up with this idea or whatever it is, you could say develop or brainstorm. Or instead of saying I told you about, you could say advertised, marketed, right? Those are better, more professional words. And here's kind of an example of what it might actually also look like on your activities list or on your activity section of your Common App. You always want to list in descending level of importance. Every admissions counselor knows this. So if I see editor of international column school newspaper on top, I am going to know that that was probably your most active activity. And I'm going to assume that worked as an assistant at Dr. Tom's medical clinic is something you did not do as much. It was definitely less important than being an editor of international column. So you always want to put those in levels of descending importance. So for your action item for this section, now you're seeing why it's so important to really get it down on paper and play with it, play with the words, play with the verbiage, get out the thesaurus and start writing this down and filling that out. And then that way, when you do get into your Common App and you have to fill out that section, it's going to be a lot easier. It always sucks when you're like trying to write something out and then the Common App doesn't let you keep writing because you reached your character limit. So you want to get in, you want to play with it, come up with some powerful verbs, move things around, and then get that into your Common application so that you can actually formalize it and finish it up with the formatting. I hope this section was helpful for you. In the next section, I'm going to go over some examples of the additional information section and what that's about, as well as some dates and deadlines.